Attending Hogwarts school is a rite of passage for any young witch or wizard. But more than that, it's a privilege, an extraordinary opportunity reserved only for those born with magical abilities. For magical children coming from magical families, the process is fairly straightforward. They receive a Hogwarts acceptance letter in the mail that informs them of their acceptance to Hogwarts, along with a list of required textbooks and materials required for the upcoming school year. And for muggle-borns, that is, magical children born to non-magical families, Hogwarts dispatches a member of staff to travel to the home of said muggle-born student so that the letter can be properly introduced and explained. And it's during this time that the staff member is given the behemoth task of explaining magic and the entire magical world to a muggle who has no concept of either whatsoever. When the letter arrives at the home of a magical family, it's hardly a surprise. For generations, attending Hogwarts has been a tradition. Parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents likely walked the same castle halls. Therefore, these families are well acquainted with the process and have likely been expecting the letter sometime near their child's 11th birthday. And whether or not they'll attend the school isn't even a question, it's simply assumed. For magical families, Hogwarts is more than just a school. It's a legacy, a cornerstone of their culture and heritage. And the thought of rejecting an acceptance letter to Hogwarts is almost unheard of. But one thing that's always dawned on me is how shocking it must be for the parents of muggleborns to receive news of the magical world. And as if coming to terms with the existence of an entire magical world isn't difficult enough already, they're then expected to entrust the safety of their children to a bunch of complete strangers in a world that they not only have no understanding of, but have also just been introduced to. Oh, and let's not forget the cherry on top. Once your child leaves, you're expected to keep the whole thing a secret. Don't tell your friends, your neighbors, or anyone else, because the magical world doesn't exist as far as the rest of society is concerned. Given how difficult it must be for the parents of muggle-born students to come to terms with this reality, I'd be willing to bet that there has been more than one instance of parents refusing, at least initially, to send their child to the school. After all, what good parent wouldn't worry about sending their child off to an unfamiliar, hidden world filled with unknown dangers and rules they don't understand? I know my mum would take issue, at least until she learns a bit more about it. Therefore, today I want to discuss the topic of parents refusing to send their children to Hogwarts, unpacking whether it's possible to actually refuse, and if they do, taking a look at what the future might hold for their magical child. Let's dive into it. Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. The first example that comes to mind when discussing the topic of refusing to send a child to Hogwarts is, of course, Harry Potter and his horrible aunt and uncle. From the moment Harry's first acceptance letter arrived, Vernon and Petunia Dursley did everything in their power to prevent him from attending the school. They ripped up his letters, boarded up the mail slot, and even fled to a desolate shack on a rock in the middle of the sea, all in a desperate attempt to keep Harry from entering the magical world. "Haven't I told you he's not going?" he hissed. "He's going to Stonewall High, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish, spell books and wands, and..." Their motives, of course, were rooted in their deep-seated resentment of magic and their irrational fear of anything that challenged their perfectly normal lives. And instead of being celebrated for being magic, the Dursleys hated Harry for it. In fact, they hated any and all things that weren't normal. Petunia held the belief that her parents preferred her magical sister to her, which forever made her despise the entire wizarding world. And when Vernon and Petunia met, Petunia confessed to Vernon that her sister was a witch, which led to them bonding over her being a freak. They unequivocally despised the wizarding world, and they did not want Harry to attend. However, despite their refusal to send Harry to Hogwarts, it would seem that the magical world wouldn't take no for an answer, as eventually Hagrid personally delivers Harry's letter to him. "If he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him," growled Hagrid. "Stop Lily and James Potter's son going to Hogwarts? You're mad. His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had, Albus Dumbledore." Based on this information, it's reasonable to assume that Hogwarts, and presumably the Ministry of Magic, has the power and authority to override the wishes of a child's legal guardians, effectively forcing them to allow the child to attend the school. But I'm not sure this effectively answers the question because Harry had such extenuating circumstances. Harry was the boy who lived, the boy of prophecy, of legend, and it's entirely possible that his importance to wizarding society was what enabled Hogwarts and the Ministry to take such drastic measures to ensure his attendance. Harry wasn't just any magical child, he was the boy who defeated Voldemort, a symbol of hope and resistance for the entire wizarding community. I also wonder whether Dumbledore played a personal role in ensuring that Harry attended Hogwarts. As someone who is fully aware of the prophecy and its implications, Dumbledore undoubtedly recognized the critical importance of Harry fulfilling his destiny and ultimately defeating Voldemort. Therefore, it's completely possible that Dumbledore leveraged his authority as the headmaster of Hogwarts to override the Dursleys' resistance. Because Harry's situation was so unique, it's hard to determine if this was the norm. I can't imagine that Hogwarts or the Ministry would intervene as forcefully as they did with Harry for just any old muggle-born. I mean, can you picture Hagrid busting down the door of some random muggle's small cottage in rural England to hand-deliver a Hogwarts letter? It seemed like that might be problematic. But if that isn't the case, what would happen? As it happens, J.K. Rowling has discussed this before, although it was in the early 2000s, and she has of course since contradicted herself. Everyone who shows magical ability before their 11th birthday will automatically gain a place at Hogwarts. There is no question of not being magical enough. You are either magical or you are not. There is no obligation to take up the place. However, a family might not want their child to attend Hogwarts. In the above passage, she reveals that parents of magical children do have a choice in the matter. However, there are a number of issues with this. The first issue that comes to mind is that a child without a magical education does not have any control over their magic, and magic is known to do all sorts of weird things when it isn't harnessed properly. Before Hogwarts, and sometimes even early in their studies, magical children are inherently prone to accidental, uncontrolled magic, which is often triggered by strong emotions like anger, fear, or confusion. This magic, which acts as a form of self-defense, can manifest in unpredictable and sometimes dangerous ways. There are plenty of examples of this in the series. Harry Potter, for example, unknowingly performed numerous acts of accidental magic before attending the school. He turned his teacher's wig blue, he shrunk one of Dudley's oversized sweaters when Aunt Petunia tried to force him to wear it, and even found himself on the school roof after being chased by Dudley and his gang. He also managed to regrow his hair overnight after Aunt Petunia gave him a dreadful haircut with kitchen scissors, and in one well-documented incident, Harry spoke to a snake at the zoo and unintentionally made the glass of its enclosure vanish. And without proper guidance, I suspect that these instances of accidental magic would only escalate, becoming increasingly dangerous for both the child and everyone around them. They need to attend magical school so that they can learn how to channel this magic, and I don't believe there's any other way to achieve this. And in the event that the magic is suppressed or the child is told not to do magic, things can get even worse. In the Fantastic Beasts films, we learn that suppressing one's magical abilities from a young age can lead to a dangerous buildup of magical energy, ultimately creating what we now know as an Obscurus, aka the manifestation of the young witch or wizard's repressed energy. The first example of an Obscurial, a wizard who had developed an Obscurus in the series, was Credence Barebone. Traditionally, Obscurials are young witches or wizards that are physically or emotionally abused to the point that they feel the need to repress their magic and hide their abilities. This repression is directly related to trauma experienced as a result of their magic and a development of hatred, fear, or shame in regard to their powers. And in the event that a muggle-born's parent is so against magic that they refuse to send their child to school, I'd imagine that the likelihood of their child developing an Obscurus would be pretty high. I met one in Sudan 3 months ago. There used to be more of them, but they still exist. Before wizards went underground, and we were still being hunted by muggles, young wizards and witches sometimes tried to suppress their magic to avoid persecution. Instead of learning to harness or to control their powers, they developed what was called an Obscurus. And the problem with an Obscurial is that they're extremely unpredictable. They are largely controlled by a powerful parasitic magical force that has an immense capacity for harm. In fact, most Obscurials don't live past their preteen years. Throughout the Harry Potter series, we only ever hear of one witch who could, retrospectively, be labelled as an Obscurial, and that's Ariana Dumbledore. And though it hasn't been confirmed, the explanation of her illness fits the description to a T. After being traumatized by an attack from Muggle boys, Ariana was left unable to control her abilities, which eventually led to a magical explosion that accidentally killed her mother. So you can see the issue with this. Bearing all of this in mind, I really can't imagine a world where Hogwarts and or the Ministry of Magic would allow this sort of thing to happen. Leaving magical children under the supervision of their non-magical parents would simply be far too much of a risk to both the Muggle and wizarding populations. But beyond safety, uncontrolled magic also threatens the larger wizarding community by risking exposure to Muggles. Violations of the Statute of Secrecy, the cornerstone of the magical world's protection, occur when magic is witnessed by non-magical individuals. Therefore, a muggle-born child being left to accidentally levitate objects or cause explosions in a public place would directly jeopardize the secrecy that the wizarding world has worked so hard to maintain. This is precisely why institutions like Hogwarts are so vital. They don't just teach children how to wield magic, they also provide the structure, discipline, and understanding necessary to control it. And for these reasons, I think it probably is mandatory for the parents of any magical child to send them to Hogwarts. Now the question is, how is this enforced? I think that a key factor to focus on here is that the Statute of Secrecy is maintained due to the efforts of both sides. Despite the Muggle and Wizarding world's prominent division, there are some key Muggle figures that do know about all that is magical, and one such individual happens to be the head of the Muggle government, the Muggle Prime Minister. Traditionally, the British Prime Minister is informed about the existence of the Wizarding world on the night of their appointment. Occasionally, they would have meetings with their Wizarding world counterpart, the Minister for Magic, to discuss matters that could affect both the Wizarding and Muggle worlds, such as notable events like the escape of Sirius Black, the mass breakout from Azkaban, and the return of Lord Voldemort. And if there were any incidents where magic and the Muggle world collided in a way that couldn't be easily explained, the Prime Minister would work with the British Ministry of Magic's Office of Misinformation to create a believable cover-up story. In a previous video, I proposed the theory that the Muggle Prime Minister, being an inside man with significant authority, likely plays a key role in creating and upholding legislation designed to discreetly cover up the existence of children attending a magical school like Hogwarts. This would help the families of muggle-borns explain the absence of their children to other family members, neighbours, and government agencies. However, in this role, I would also expect the Muggle Prime Minister to play a part in facilitating the process of ensuring that magical children born to Muggle families end up attending Hogwarts. As we've already addressed, we know that in the case of Muggle-borns, Hogwarts dispatches a member of staff to travel to the home of said Muggle-born student so that Hogwarts can be properly introduced and explained. However, if the parents remain resistant to the idea, it's plausible that a highly confidential branch of the Muggle government might step in to help resolve the situation. After all, maintaining the separation between the magical and non-magical worlds is crucial for the safety and stability of both communities. I think that parents might be far less resistant to the idea of sending their child away if the government intervenes and helps to convince them that all of it, Hogwarts, magic, etc., is legitimate. But as far as preventing their child from being sent away, I really don't think they have much choice in the matter. Before we close out this video, I do want to address one final issue. What happens if the parents are on board, but the child doesn't want to attend? If the child in question happened to be, for example, a young version of Vernon Dursley, someone who is about as opposed to magic as you can get, I imagine you'd have quite a difficult time getting him to attend. However, in this instance, I imagine things would unfold similarly to how the Muggle world enforces mandatory education, requiring parents to ensure their children attend school or receive proper schooling. Just as Muggle parents are required by law to ensure their children receive schooling, the Wizarding world likely has its own regulations to ensure that young witches and wizards receive the magical education necessary to control their abilities and integrate into society. Therefore, if the child was adamantly opposed, I suspect that it would likely fall on both the parents and Hogwarts staff to convince the child of the necessity of attending. Hogwarts isn't just about learning charms and potions, it's about ensuring the safety of the child, their family, and the broader wizarding world. And without proper training, their uncontrolled magic could cause significant harm or expose the magical community to muggles, violating the statute of secrecy. Allowing a child not to attend the school just doesn't seem like a viable option under any circumstances. Let's just hope that, for the most part, everyone's on board. Anyway, hopefully that answers the question of whether or not magical children have the option of staying out of Hogwarts. If you want to know more about what parents of muggle-born students might tell their neighbours, family members and friends about their child's whereabouts, or if you want to learn more about the process wherein muggle-borns are informed of their magical ability, check out my video, What Do Parents of Muggle-borns Tell the Government? Harry Potter Theory. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live